I'm here at the North American Honeybee Expo in 2024, NAHBE, and I've convinced Chris Werner of Indian Summer Honey Farms to come and talk to me. Chris, I talked to you about this yesterday, and you were giving me the list of standard topics that we could talk about, mites and this and that and the other. And I said, what I really would like to talk about is I am trying to grow into a full-time beekeeping career, and I'm next to Corey Stevens, who is trying to grow into a full-time beekeeping career. And yesterday I interviewed Troy Hall, who has a full-time beekeeping career. We're all sort of non-standard in beekeeping. We're stationary, we're smaller, we have hundreds of hives, not thousands. We're not migratory, we don't go to almonds and that sort of thing. And you have been there and done that for a very long time. I was talking to you last night. You've been in this 43 years. I'm 43 years old. So you got started in 1980 when I was born in 1980.
That's right. It was a good year.
Yeah, very good year. So you have been through a lot of the challenges that we are facing and are going to face. And I want to pick your brain about that.
Okay.
So you got started in the 80s, and you basically did like an apprenticeship, like in a trade. You worked for a commercial beekeeper for a number of years.
I worked for Gary Orskovic, ran Honeyland Farms out of Saukville, Wisconsin. I lived near him, and he found out through one of our local bee clubs that I was going to get into bees in the following spring and offered me a job, and it really turned out to be a 5-year apprenticeship. Because I was working my own bees on the side, 200 hives, but primarily was his first year right-hand man, and then as his business grew and he added employees, we branched out, raising queens of our own. He did, and I learned. I networked a lot then, met other beekeepers, met a beekeeper that I worked real close with for a number of years. I don't think he's in the bees at all anymore, Charles Smith. We worked together. It was that networking, like you're talking about with Corey. That's key.
Yeah.
To do it on your own is really difficult. Prior to mites, which arrived in 87, 85, depending on if you're thinking about the trachea mites, which they were a problem too when they got here, it was a much easier profession to break into because really American foulbrood was the only real problem beekeepers had to contend with, and it was controllable at the time, and it was also, even though honey was about 64 to 68 cents a pound, a lot less wholesale than it is today, it was a business that you could make enough money to run the number of hives you're talking about on the side and have it be productive. Today, wholesale honey is a lot higher, and honey that you'd find at a show like this or at a farm market is considerably higher. We're looking at $6 to $10 a pound. But if you're not in an area that can give you a consistent honey crop that you can count on every year, you're putting a whole year's worth of work into what you hope will be a honey crop that'll materialize that you can either market if it's a larger volume like we produce, wholesale. We sell some to Bob Benny, for example. He takes the risk of getting it bottled and getting it on the store shelf. If you want to take that risk, that's called value added, then you can charge a little bit more than the wholesale price, maybe a lot more. But it's a real unknown from year to year whether you'll make that crop. And then, of course, with the mites we mentioned, you never know when that mite problem is going to rear its ugly head and take out a lot of your stock in the fall, and now what are you going to do over the winter? You've got to rebuild somehow. So I don't know that I'm going to have a really good answer for a small number.
Well, let me
of hives.
Let me ask you some questions.
Okay.
Then. All right, so you got started in the early 80s. You apprenticed basically for 5 years, and this is just like apprenticing as a plumber or electrician or anything. You learned the trade,
yes,
and built your own bees on the side.
Yes.
How many hives did you have before you decided you could go full time?
1,200.
You had 1,200 yourself.
We had 1,200.
Was that a full-time job for you and your wife?
By the time I met Becky, and we were married in '87. We were running 1,200 hives.
Okay.
We still would help Gary and work with him in the winter here in Florida. And it really wasn't until about '98 that we completely separated and were completely on our own.
Okay.
And we didn't at that point raise our own queens, and it was in '99, 2000 that out of necessity we had to start grafting our own cells.
I'm going to add some context here
Okay.
because viewers may not understand. You are a Wisconsin, Florida beekeeper.
Yes.
Your season, you come down to Florida in the late fall, October, and then you're actually making bees right now, or are they foraging wild radish, or what?
Right now, our bees are foraging maple.
Maple's blooming down there already?
Maple is blooming,
Wow.
starts blooming at Christmas time in Central Florida. And you can do whatever you'd like to prior to that bloom, but you cannot make those bees start to build. You're working against the calendar really, because until
daylight and all
right,
that.
you've got to start gaining daylight. Then the bees will pick up. So yes, we are beginning to build bees. Actually, the end of this month, January, we'll gather together 160 hives or so to start up our cell yard.
Yep. And you'll start queen rearing.
We begin the queen rearing the last week of January. Begins with the cell yard, crafting our first cells. We've already selected about a dozen potential queen mothers that will be our queen mothers, and so we've had our eye on them really all summer.
Yeah.
All of those are queens that have produced a crop of honey for us that last seasons, and 2 or 3 of them are 2 years old.
Yeah.
They're from a season, a whole nother season beyond that. They're still doing well, and so those are queens we feel are real proven. We know what they're going to do for us, or potentially can. So that's already taken place.
Yeah. So how many queens do you typically raise in the season?
Well, we sell between 10 and 13,000.
Okay.
We book 10,000, but we always are able to go a little bit beyond that. But
you're sold out years in advance. I can't even get on your list.
I know, and I feel bad about that, but we do not advertise. So
yeah, exactly.
It's not like we're enticing people. We don't mean to do that, but because thanks to Bob Binney and
other people,
yourselves, we do these interviews, they find out about us, they want to try our queens. We would desperately love to get some of our stock into their hands, but more than that, we would really like to get people to take us up on the offer to come down and spend just 3 or 4 days in February or March and tag along with us and see what it is to set up the cell yard, see what our grafting looks like, and of course see what the nucleuses look like, the placement of the nukes, and then when we're caging queens in March and April, and then be able to take some of that knowledge and experience back to their bees and do the same thing. This talk I'll give tomorrow is on our logistics, and a lot of the reason we got into queens to begin with was to replenish our lost stock, because mites affected us at that time as much as anybody, and we would lose 30 to 70%. Our worst year was 70% loss, and we still that year went back with 1,900 good hives to Wisconsin. We were running right around 2,000 at the time. So,
when does your queen rearing season end, and when do you go back to Wisconsin?
It ends the last Friday in April.
Because
I take off with a load of 500 nukes for Wisconsin. I'm up there the first Saturday in May, and our first semi-loads of bees are coming in the Sunday night after that.
Do you put them straight into a honey flow about May 15th?
We get them, yes. We get them into the apple orchards as quickly as we can. We do some pollinating up there. Some of our apple yards are year-round honey yards. I mean, season long. They're there all summer, but they benefit the apple grower, and then they benefit us because it's a great location. And most of the apple growers in southeastern Wisconsin aren't using the harsh chemicals that will affect the bees. We don't have bee loss. But the queens are still being caged. Dividers are being pulled. The crew that's left in Florida will be busy the whole month of May. We send a semi-load a week up, take 7 loads, 7 semis to get all the bees back to Wisconsin.
That's about 4,000 colonies total,
Correct.
somewhere around there.
Between 4 and 4,500.
Okay.
And that 500 is we're going to lose some through the summer to queenlessness,
Yep.
to swarms that don't requeen well.
It's sort of like what Ian Sepler calls his nuke battery.
Yes, and I really enjoyed his talk last year, and I thought, man, that's great knowledge right there, and that is a good approach for lots of beekeepers to take. Kirk Webster, somebody we've known, and he does very similar. Winter's bees, his nucleus is over his colonies. Those are all great ideas. That's what you get when you come to a place like this.
Yeah.
I mean, I am not the end all, and I learn a lot walking up and down and looking at some of these products and talking to other fellas and gals, and it's you're never too old to learn. You never know it all. And Becky and I are fixing to retire and turn it over to the kids,
Oh boy.
the business, but we'll still stay very active in aspects of it that we enjoy.
Yeah.
But I don't plan on stop learning.
So your bees are in Wisconsin in May. You go into the honey flow. Starts with apples, and then you've got a season-long honey flow up that far north.
I'm going to make everybody that's a beekeeper that's watching this, don't try to come to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We're packed up with bees. But if you were fortunate enough to inherit some bee yards,
to have the yards and the relationships and everything.
We start with dandelion. And then we have something called buckthorn, which is an invasive shrubbery, but it's a wonderful nectar producer.
We have Carolina buckthorn. Is that the same, or
I
do you got a
don't
northern?
know, but it's probably a northern variant.
Okay.
It produces a little berry the birds love, and they poop out the seeds everywhere. It's an evergreen just about. It doesn't lose its leaves until it's really, really cold. But it's blooming along with autumn olive, which is another invasive. Yeah, but a tremendous
really good nectar producer.
Yeah.
It makes good honey too.
Wonderful honey, and honeysuckles. And all of that is in May. And our supering rounds primarily go on 3 deep supers over an excluder on a single in May. That's one of the very first visits. Mm-hmm. That's what they'll get. And we will do that and then come back around in about a month when the black locust begins to bloom.
Okay.
And that's one in our region that's also becoming a more dependable crop. There's more and more black locust, and that's what's being cut. And so we're seeing it every year. Really then to follow that up would be the basswood in July. And we're pulling right after the basswood is done blooming. And by that time...
Is basswood pretty reliable for you?
It used to be something that you'd look at every other year, and some of the beekeepers back in the 80s would say it's about once every 4 or 5 years you'd get a really good dependable crop. But because of woodlot preservation, and there's not as many farmers cutting and maintaining their woodlots and cutting den trees and older trees, there's a lot of basswood that's growing to maturity now. And I would say it's an almost every year dependable with those really high peaks. Every 2 to 5 years you'll get just an incredible bloom with a lot, and it's very weather sensitive. Thunderstorm, high winds can blow down a lot of blossom in one day, and you can lose a lot of potential hope. And same thing with the black locust.
Yeah.
Black locust is a lovely tree, big grape bloom, just gorgeous and wonderful smell under it. It just takes one real strong, severe thunderstorm to end all of that.
It blooms in late April where I'm at.
Okay.
And we have strong spring thunderstorms in late April most years.
Yes.
So we don't get a lot of black locust honey where I'm at.
Yeah. But when you add all those together, and we're looking at just a really good, perhaps 110 pound average that we can get.
Do you get into sweet clover after basswood?
We do, and that was what I was going to say. If we're pulling that crop when the sweet clover's blooming, so that we're able to do that with very little robbing.
Yeah.
Now, if we get into late September and we get a frost, it's Katie bar to the door.
Yeah.
You're going to be fighting a lot of robbing bees after that point, because for some reason our goldenrod and aster don't yield like they used to. We used to depend on that. We'd see a lot of real yellow wax, and we just don't. We don't know why. We don't know if it's a worn out field for us and its mite effect. We don't know if it's something environmental. We do know, for example, that alfalfas and buckwheats have been genetically modified. They've been hybridized to where they don't produce nothing. It's a waste. The plant doesn't need to send its energy in that direction to set seed, so that gene's been turned off. Well, is it possible that some of that has cross-pollinated to wild things? I don't know. I'd love to see some research done on it.
Yeah.
But we don't depend on the fall crops anymore, so the sweet clover is where we hopefully get everything pulled before there's robbing and have them all ready to go back south by early October.
Yeah. And do you do any feeding in Wisconsin, or do you wait until you get them back to Florida?
We do try to get 2 gallons on every single, because we've stripped them back down to a single at that point, and we will take off our oxalic acid treatment, which has been on all summer. We'll treat them with an essential oil treatment at that point in time, and we will give them 2 gallons of feed. If it's doubled up, if we have a dud in the yard, we double it up on a real strong single, we give that one 4 gallons, 2 buckets. And then we take them to Florida that way. Our trucks are never overloaded. We can get a maximum number of singles on a truck, approaching 800 to a truck.
So you're doing 10 to 13,000 queens a year, 110 pound average on, how many production colonies do you typically run?
4,000.
About 4,000. Are you selling nukes at all, or do you just use the nukes within your operation?
We sell 500 nukes to Wisconsin beekeepers and beekeepers that are along our route.
Okay.
We go
so
up
you'll
through
just drop off as you're heading north?
Paducah and up through it, central Illinois, and we'll make drops. And we do sell nukes in Florida with our certified pre-owned queens through the winter.
Okay.
They're excellent queens. We can't spare the queens, the new queens, and those early nukes, so we'll sell those to beekeepers really starting in February, late February, and all of March and into April. By the time we get into April, we'll often have lots of brand new queens available then in those nukes. Yeah. But that gets those folks going early, and like I said, any queens that are showing any propensity to failure, we eliminate. We just don't keep them, because we don't want our support bees to be bees that are coming from bad genetics. So we're looking for really robust colonies across the board throughout the winter, because it's real easy for us to replace them. Yeah. So we don't have to nurse them along.
So I'm going to take it back for a minute. That's a synopsis of your operation now. Let's talk about how you got there. My background is agricultural economics. That's my college degree. So I'm wondering, you built up to 1,200 colonies while you were working as a full-time beekeeper for a commercial beekeeper. Mm-hmm. Did you do that out of cash, or did you take debt on to get up to that?
I took on an initial $26,000 loan with PCA, Production Credit Association.
Okay. That was back in the land bank era.
And they just about killed me.
I worked for Farm Credit for 8 years, so the land bank and PCA merged to form Farm Credit.
Well, they wanted to be paid right away when I'd get a check, and it made it very difficult for me. I wanted to use that operating money to do other things with the business, and so as a very young man trying to learn how to negotiate, that was difficult. And I ended up going to another bank and getting my father to co-sign a loan, and I went to a regular bank and got more favorable rate for return payment options. And that was really the only loan we ever operated on. After that, we were able to continue to build on cash. And I learned a tremendous amount. I saw a lot from other beekeepers, which saved me making costly mistakes. Yeah. And I was blessed to make good ones.
That tells me that you also lived frugally if you were able to build the business out of cash and sustain the household out of cash.
We lived in campers.
Okay.
My wife and my father-in-law was a very, very reputable dentist in Milwaukee with a very good practice, and here I'm taking his oldest daughter, and we're living out of campers, and it was, bless his heart, he said okay, I mean reluctantly, but at first, but they're very happy things have turned out for us. But Yeah, Becky and I lived, to coin a phrase, like nobody else, so that someday we could live like nobody else.
Quoting Dave Ramsey.
Yes,
on
sir.
there.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and I believe, we never took any of his quotes above listening to him on the radio, and I amen to everything he says. It's just good common sense.
So I am of that same philosophy. Keep debt loads very low. Try to build out of cash. Live frugally. But when you have a lot of needs for capital and you don't have as much capital as you need, how do you pick which investments to make, which pieces of equipment to buy, and which ones to make do without?
Well, the thing you have to remember when you're working with any livestock is the livestock is where your income is going to come from. When you see cattle in Florida that are on real bare pasture and you don't see any hay out there, they're starving their profit out of their herd, and you hate to see that. We as beekeepers tend to do that sometimes when we don't keep track of what our bees need. So the feed and the nutrition for the colony is the most important. Then as long as we know we've got healthy colonies, in that step that we made from just maintaining our own bees and depending on pollination money, those were the stopgappers for us. It was making some pollination money on blueberries, on cranberries in Wisconsin, which we don't do anymore, and on apple pollination. We don't charge our apple growers anymore. We sell a lot of honey through their shops, and they provide us with locations that are wonderful locations for honey production throughout the year. Some of them are doing extremely well. I might want to revisit that decision because they're doing really, really well. But at the time, they were struggling too. Yeah. So it was a mutual agreement sort of a thing. We helped each other out. But when we needed it, there were years where we were depending on that check. Yeah. Because if we didn't get back and get paid for the bees when they went in, there was no money in the bank. And we did not go to our parents and ask for more. Yeah. My dad was always willing to help whenever it was needed. When he retired from his sales job, he was right there helping me for almost 15 years. He'd come out and do whatever he could with the bees. He really, really loved it. And Becky's dad's done that too. And matter of fact, her parents will spend a month with us every winter in Florida, and they fill most of our queen cages for us, all the candy in the tube. So everybody has a part, they play a role, and it's all that contributing effort. And of course, we laugh, we're not an organic honey producer, but we're an organic farm. Yeah. We've grown all of our own help. And so all of our kids help, our grandkids help. And
you've been blessed with family.
Very, very blessed.
How many children and grandchildren do you have now?
We have 7 children. 5 of them are married. We have 15 grandchildren, and I can now say we have 2 more on the way. So we'll have 17 by this time next year, Lord willing. And you'll see in a lot of our PowerPoint presentations, we try to throw a lot of the kids in. They're out there with us. They're out there in our bees. That's one of the reasons why we started to select our own stock was we wanted gentle bees that we could work with our kids. And especially when we started selling stock, we were sort of persuaded to go more into the Carniolan line for mite resistance and just general health. But always gentle bees. That's a very, very top.
So you mentioned that when you've got limited capital to put in, make sure your bees are healthy first and increase your bee counts as long as you can, because that's where your income generation cash flow is going to come from. Past that, what do you do? Is it labor efficiency or equipment?
I just came from Marla's talk on propolis, and I enjoyed it quite a little bit. Very insightful, some great ideas that beekeepers can incorporate into their operation. But Becky and my experience with propolis goes all the way back to 1990 when we went to an American Honey Producers convention in Tucson, and we met the Lusbys, Ed and Dee Lusby, and they were big on feeding back pollen to their bees to control American foulbrood. And it took some persuading, but they got researchers at the Carl Hayden Research Center to listen to them and look at the research, and Dee did tremendous research. And tremendous. She had an adjutant general background, so she could do paperwork.
Yeah.
They also were very instrumental in the 4.9 millimeter cell theory, small cell for combating problems. So really since the 90s, we've been collecting all of our propolis from our honey supers. We don't ever go into our brood chambers much except just to scrape it out of the way when we're making nukes, but all our honey supers are stored indoors all summer, but when we go through, or winter, but when we go through the extracting system, every box is cleaned. Those scrapings are washed in cold water, and we separate then the wax from the propolis, and the propolis we sell, but a good deal of it, we make hundreds of pounds of it that way, hundreds of pounds. We will freeze and we will grind and feed back to our bees in our protein cakes.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that especially in the cell yard, but we feed it liberally to all the colonies if they need protein, or we can feed it in a fondant cake if it's needed. Florida used to have a real problem with chalk brood, and it's basically gone away, and whether or not I can attribute that to the feeding of the propolis, I can't really say for sure, but we have no chalk brood in our operation at all, none. And
I wonder if it's a genetic thing, the bees just adapted to it, or
could be a number of things. I mean, nobody's really talking about the tracheum mite anymore.
Yeah.
The FDA's taken antibiotics away unless you get a veterinarian, and that's difficult.
Yeah.
But yet we don't hear about the American foul brood problem we used to 10 years ago. So, you know, we wonder, what's up? You know, I knock on wood, we don't have a problem with it. I'm not going to go out and look for it. But at any rate, we sell the propolis. We sell all of our beeswax. We take very good care of our cappings and sell it as virgin capping wax. So those are diversification in your operation. Even if it's only a small amount, you know, that helps. And then again, if you can partner with farmers that need pollinating, we've never had a written contract of any kind. For anyone.
People ask me if I have handshake agreements or written contracts for bee yards, and I said, I'm related to most of the people that, you know, I've got bees on, so it's just a handshake.
My dad, Joe Werner, he taught me, and he taught my brother Greg, who has his own flooring business, that your word is your bond.
Yeah.
If I give you my word, come hell or high water, I'm going to carry it through.
Even if it hurts me.
That's right.
I'm going to try to do it.
We're going to do it. And so that's just another way to generate some income. But it really, we went out and found our own accounts to sell our honey to, wholesale, bulk, in drums or buckets or even totes.
You've got some really interesting corporations or big businesses that you're selling into. Isn't there a manufacturer that's making drinks?
This is 2024 we're in now. The spring of 2023 we broke, and it was like a divorce for me, but we, for their good, broke our relationship with Sprecher Brewery in Milwaukee. Randy Sprecher met Becky and I at a Wisconsin Honey Producers booth at the State Fair in '87 and began buying honey that year from us for his root beer. At that time, he would buy it in 5-gallon buckets, and when he came the first time, he took 2 5-gallon buckets and a little red Fiero and drove off with him. When we stopped being their sole supplier after 30 years, we were delivering 6,000 pounds of honey a week, 2 3,200-pound totes.
And you said you broke that for their good.
I did, because their new owner group is desiring to go nationwide.
Okay, and you just can't keep a...
Well, it would be foolhardily dangerous for us to even try, because at 6,000 pounds a week, they're already over 300,000 pounds of honey, and in a good year, we can produce 400. But what about that bad year?
Yeah.
In years past, we've gone to friends of ours in Michigan and bought, you know, truckloads of honey just to make sure we make it through. And we've used the help of the Callis Honey Farm in Milwaukee recently, and actually we worked with them. They're only 10 minutes from Sprecher, We supply a lot of honey to Calais. We sell quite a bit to them, as do other Wisconsin beekeepers. So it just made sense that that particular organization, Sprecher's, was at a point where to protect their flow and not have it be interrupted or run into any troubles, they would go with somebody that could make sure they could maintain that volume. You always, as a producer, whether it's queens, queen cells, nucleuses, pollination, you've got to think about that person you've given your word to that you're going to provide their need. You've got to make sure you can do that.
Yeah.
If you can't, you owe it to them to let them know as early as possible or take whatever steps necessary to meet that need. Interestingly, we had a fire in '98. It was devastating. It wiped our business out, completely burned everything we owned to the ground except our bees. They were all out in the field. And we were supplying, at that point in time, about 7 bread companies, Great Harvest, and they came and wanted to know, are you going to be able to continue to help us out? We lost 119 barrels of honey there.
Yeah.
I was able to go back to Gary that I had worked for. We were still working with him, and he supplied me honey that summer, and then I replaced it in the fall when my crop came in. That was a big year. Now, do not go out and have a fire to do this, but we were well insured, and the insurance company, Rural, took good care of us, and we were able to rebuild, and we bought our first cow in that year. And we did not start extracting our honey until October. Really, the end of September, early October, we started to stockpile it. That was before small hive beetle. We could get away with that. We had a hot room for the honey. But really, that was also the year that we broke ties with Gary. Up to that point, we'd actually had our winter home on his property, and we'd come down. And it kind of forced us to get out there and be completely on our own. So we started that year to raise our own queen cells, just for our own production. And then the following year, we began to actually produce in mass queens. And again, we had help. We had friends of ours that we'd known over the years, acquaintances we had made, networking from Serbia. And they were able to come and spend time with us. And really for 7 years, Gvozden Stevanovic and his son Milenko and several of their other helpers would come every winter on a visa to be able to visit, spend some time in America. And clandestinely, they were helping us with our queen program, teaching us, helping us to become the beekeepers I think that we've become. Really appreciate our bees, really do a good job, and all of those things go together to make, if we're sitting here as a success, I owe every one of those individuals a thank you.
I'd like to summarize just some points that I've learned here, and then I'm going to ask you advice that you would have for younger guys. So I've asked you a couple of times about the order of investing into the business and which things to prioritize, and I'm thinking along lines of, trucks and equipment and extractors and things like that. And of course, bees, investing into the bees as well as income generating units. And the 2 times I've brought that up, you have brought it back to taking care of the bees. And I know that you're a firm believer that if you take care of the bees will take care of you. And you really take that to heart. Something else that I've picked up is the relationships inside beekeeping with other commercial beekeepers. When you had a catastrophic loss, because you are conscientious and genuine and honest and trustworthy and a good man, you've got friends that you can go and say, something really bad has happened to me and I need some help. And they're willing to help you because you'd be willing to help them.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the farming community in southeastern Wisconsin. Barn fires were sadly common, and farmers always banded together and helped one another. And I grew up in that environment, so it just came second nature. And the beekeeping community can be that way too. It isn't always, sadly, but it can be. And if you, again, build your career with some other people, that can be your partner. But you help each other out. it'll just make those difficult times a whole lot easier. And you can afford to purchase things that on your own you wouldn't necessarily want to or be able to. I'm thinking of supplies for mite treatments, syrup, for example, buying a semi-load of syrup. You split it up with several neighbor farmers and you save yourself travel time and maybe some money. And we try to do all of those things. And again, you learn to do those things and you learn where the opportunity exists when you come to functions like this and meet other people and be honest and open. I mean, the stuff I share in my talks, my PowerPoints, if you take a picture of it, you're going to see where every single bee yard I have is. Because I show a map of a point I want to make. I mean, I'm not afraid of letting a secret out that's going to harm me.
Yeah.
The best advice I could give you right now is to come visit us. If we're too far away, see if you could visit some of these other very successful operations that are out there. The Rossmans are here. The Lusbys were talking about the 80s. I mean, there's so many. I couldn't begin to list all of them. Where you would just go and tag along, offer your help. Maybe not talking about an apprenticeship necessarily, but maybe if you're in a position where you could do that. I wasn't married at the time when I met you. It's a different story.
I'm married and I've got an 8 and a 5-year-old.
So that would be out of the question.
I'm homebound.
Right, but going for a long weekend, that would be doable, and learning, getting some experience. But that's where we're at right now, and my sons, they about 90% share my enthusiasm for this, is we want to be able to bring people on and give them an experience that they can take back and then apply at their business. Maximum utilization of available resources is not as exploitative as it might sound to some. It is taking what God's given you and being a good steward with it and doing everything that you can with it. And that includes resting it sometimes.
Yeah.
Because you don't wear it out. That's the part of that phrase that some people take the wrong way. We don't exhaust it. We make it last as long as it can. We make it be as productive as you can. And the raising of the queen cells, the queen cell business for us gives our boys a huge financial boost in 2 months, because every cell beyond Indian Summer Honey Farms needs, they sell themselves. And that's money they split between themselves working in the cell yard. So they love it, they enjoy doing it, and it's also a encouragement to them to do as good a job as possible. The more cells, the more they can sell. And they're also then helping beekeepers in our drivable area to come and pick up queen cells. So everybody comes out a winner in that scenario, and it works great.
Well, Chris, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about?
I just want to thank you for giving me the chance, Nathan, to talk on your blog here.
I'm getting more out of this than you are, I guarantee you that.
I don't know. I think I've met a friend now. So, but I would encourage people that are watching this, if you didn't come to this event this year, it's not something you might be able to come to every year, but I would say try to come at least.
It's a unique event.
It's a very unique event, and it's very uplifting in the world we live in today with a lot of problems, a lot of things to pray about. Everybody here has got a smile on their face, and not just the vendors, who I hope are making a good income off of sales, but a lot of beekeepers are making friends and solving some problems. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, Chris, I really do appreciate it. Your time. I appreciate it.